you're up.
I know I feel like I'm always first. I'm trying to decide which one I would like to talk about. I mean, they're all. I guess let's talk about how AI and specifically AI related tooling has shifted your mindset um, on the way that you work or the way that you approach problems and your day-to-day job.
So a nice softball to kick us off.
The biggest thing for me is something that I've talked about with you guys a bunch already, but just the ability to, I guess, like things that felt unattainable to me, or problems that felt hard to solve, or areas where I'm not as familiar with the part of the code base or certain technology. Um, I just like it seems more approachable to get started and to build stuff. Um, and that's like with the day-to-day sort of job stuff, but then outside of that, like ideas that I have that I would probably not consider doing because they might take too long to build are like not scary at all anymore. It just feels like it makes it really easy and comfortable to just like get started on something because it can help you with that early beginnings of a product or a problem. It's really good in that regard. So like it just made me feel more comfortable and confident in that I can make progress. I don't get blocked as easy. Um, and then like when it comes to product stuff, I find myself spending more time, conversing with Claude or whatever, about the feature requirements or the like nitty-gritty details, but like in an attempt to help me better understand problems and whatnot. Um, and spending more time on like probably the more important things like the UX flow, the user flows, and what are we trying to accomplish with a particular feature and task and whatever, rather than like spending as much time about the code because I feel like some of the code aspects, especially when working with clients on like early stage product, for example, where some of the large architectural problems don't exist yet. Like the code part's kind of the easy part. So like making sure you can nail the requirements and spend time thinking about that stuff. I feel like I get to spend more time on that now. Um, and then yeah, the last bullet here is kind of like I am starting to wonder if when we think about products, because AI enables you to get started so quickly and like get initial versions of things created and out the door. I wonder if that should be changing my perspective on the types of problems and software products we should be building. Like, should we be more ambitious? Like, things that felt too big to do as a small three-person company seem more obtainable to do now, more worth trying. That part like excites me the most, I think, because like yeah, I know like people talk about the one person $1 billion company. I'm not trying to be that polarizing, but I do think there's, a future where the things that you can accomplish as a small team are quite expansive. I think the depth of that is huge. So I'm trying to open my mind to be more open to things and what we might be able to build in the future as a product to make money with the help of AI.
Yeah, I definitely think there's truth in the ability that we can move a heck of a lot faster today than we could a year ago. And so that does open new possibilities, new ideas that are worth entertaining. I think for me, my mindset shift has been most, and for me, just to set some context, I only started using these tools a month or two ago. I was not on the cutting edge of this for the longest time. And I really have found that my process, at least in the projects where I'm able to use an agent-based IDE, has completely shifted. I generally have an idea for how I'm going to approach what I'm trying to build, a technical design in mind, an architecture in mind. But rather than writing the code out myself, I use the agent to generate the first version much more efficiently, not because of the blank page problem. I have an idea in mind, but because it's so much more efficient for it to write the first version. And then what I get is I get an alternative perspective. Hey, I like how it did this. I don't like how it did this. And I go back and I craft and I adjust and I I make changes. There are instances in which I have a less clear idea. For example, stepping back into TypeScript development after having been away for a while, it's like, oh yeah, how do I write those jest tests? What's the syntax? What are the libraries I should be reaching for? And it just kind of points me, it refamiliarizes myself with those tools and technologies. And so I think in those areas, I get such a big productivity boost from having a a starting point to review and to build off of and to take pieces of and to reject pieces of and do it. So I think that's been my kind of mindset shift is instead of thinking as a of development as an individual activity, it does feel much more like a partnership with the agent, allowing it to write pieces, refining its pieces, and allowing it to refine my pieces.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a mindset shift necessarily, I guess, in the way that I approach writing a piece of software, because I also have a pretty good understanding of how I want to solve a problem once I get the problem into my head well enough. But it is true that the effort changes. The way that you go about communicating with the language model does change. I have to think about framing my request into a prompt that's going to be more likely to give me something that's useful and not just garbage, whatever. But I don't think that that has changed. It hasn't yet changed the way that I just sort of like fundamentally approach the problem solving. Beyond asking what the LLM is going to do, I guess, just like throwing it into the language model and seeing what comes out and then massaging it on the other side. But yeah, it seems like a faster loop. To me, so far, it has been a faster loop than Stack Overflow or go into a search engine or whatever to say, oh, I need to get strong DM to work with Kubernetes and how do I do that and whatever. Much faster to ask a language model for that stuff than to go try to hunt it down myself.
Yeah. Those are, I guess, with regards to like specifically day-to-day productivity and tasks, I think what I have in mind for a mindset shift is probably more the first and the third bullet here, which is like, and maybe this is more of a me thing. Y'all are probably not ever intimidated by technology, but uh, things that felt unattainable feeling more possible is like a mindset shift for me. And then it's probably a larger conversation, but yeah, like what are the things we can be building now? Like how broad of a product can we build with just the three of us and just part time? What is really possible? Because I think it does require a little bit of a mindset shift to truly consider what that means and like what can be built. Um, I think our instinct is to always start with something that's really small and something that can be built very quickly and easily, and is usually, uh, yeah, solving like very small scale problems rather than like something that's a big scale problem. And maybe that is something that's more possible in a future.
Maybe we haven't gone out of, for me personally, maybe we haven't gone out of my wheelhouse enough to feel this sense of things that were previously unattainable being more possible. I would say that's true. If I think about like, okay, well, I built a Swift app like 8 years ago and it was terrible. And I did it, it like worked for whatever
Yeah.
definition of worked meant at the time. And so it does seem like it would be easier to do something that's totally outside of my current expertise. But the other way that we solve problems in addition to starting really small is preferring to use the technologies that we already have, generally speaking, that I already have, generally speaking, a lot of expertise in. So like even the mobile app thing, it's like, well, we could do that, or we could do the Rails Turbo um, native app approach. And that already feels pretty attainable because we're used to most of that tool chain already.
I think from my perspective, our technology or our ability to build something with technology is not what's holding us back. It's launching and building the business and marketing the business and selling and finding customers and all of the non-technical stuff that I find most challenging. Not that agents can't help with that. There's certainly, and we leveraged ChatGPT and Claude to assist us in those areas. Um, but I think if I'm trying to focus on a problem to solve that will allow us to build and grow and launch a business, I think it's those non-technical areas that seem the most daunting and most like the biggest barrier for us to overcome.
Who's next?
Hit complete.
While we're at it, can you share the link? I can't find this discussion on Marginal. I don't know why it's not coming up for me. Everything's completed, and yeah, it's just not
Yeah,
here.
I'll drop it in the chat.
Thank you, thank you.
Remove that backslash.
Yeah, prediction guard, one of the guys from Lockheed Martin. I don't know how much value I got out of this conversation that they had. They talked mostly about all hands, a little bit less about what it means to use artificial intelligence as an engineer. Okay, but one of the things that they did touch on, kind of incidentally, was the idea that the interface that these folks are really excited about, the all hands people are really excited about, is in the GitHub pull request or coming soon in Slack they mentioned, where they're just like, hey, can you fix this issue? Can you solve this bug? Can you take this Jira ticket and make it real or whatever? And so what I was wondering in regard to software engineering, I guess more explicitly, is like, what does it mean to learn in an environment where you have Stack Overflow on whatever, Super Mario, Super Mushrooms, where you can just like ask it to do stuff and it does it. And the danger that you fall into is really long term. After you ask an artificial intelligence thing or a language model to solve 5 problems, you start to get into the organizational issues that people that like vibe code apps without a lot of rigorous self-review get into. And so where's the learning loop to you all? How do you all think that we can continue to be good software engineers as we use this tool?
Yeah, that world scares the crap out of me. I had the same response of, oh God, this is not a tool that I want to use because I want to be very involved in curating the code, in not only reviewing, but in modifying the output of the agent, not just modifying the input, say, go fix that test. And well, my test suite passes. Great. I've seen instances where it just like totally skips the test. It totally mocks out internal capabilities that are intended to be tested. And so I think if you start from a location of inexperience as a software developer, use these tools that allow you to get out over your skis, to produce code that is beyond your own ability to review and to evaluate. That code ends up getting committed, and that is the start of a snowball that just grows into a ever increasingly less maintainable, less well understood system that I don't think has longevity, um, even if its customers love it, because I believe, and they actually touched on this a little bit of you need engineers and you need rigor in your process to review the code and to ensure maintainability and code quality. Um, but that flew in the face of some of the tools that they were building, which I felt like naturally led in a direction that circumvented those code quality checks. But I think this is a big risk area for me in AI tooling and some of the tooling that's being built.
Yeah, I think the learning loop is different based on the person. So, like, if the person using AI is doing so because they're primarily interested in building a product and they're inexperienced, then the learning loop effectively happens when they produce something, make it public, and they unknowingly have a huge security hole and it goes viral, and they're like, I guess I learned something. And they're going to either hire someone to fix it or educate themselves on how to be better and fix it themselves. But that's like kind of one group of or type of user of artificial intelligence, and like for them, if they're only interested in building the product, building a business, and the engineering part is just like a means to an end, I mean, then there might not be much of a learning loop as opposed to like someone who is a newer or junior developer. Like there are very interesting ways to use artificial intelligence to learn topics. Like you can totally use Claude as a learning tool to help you get better as a Ruby developer, TypeScript, whatever, learn a new language. Like it's got all the information you can possibly imagine. It can help provide exercises. It can review stuff that you've written and kind of help you learn, but you have to want to do that. I think my biggest fear with this stuff that they kind of touch on either in this or in other articles I've read is if you become too reliant on AI to produce all your code, just like anything, you will get rusty. You will stop caring. You just will become not as good at the thing you used to be good at. It's like if you play a lot of golf and you stop playing golf, you're not going to be as good at golf. It's just like anything. So, um, yeah, I do think that the ideal scenario is one in which there is like you're combining your skills, your taste, your knowledge with um and a model to kind of help produce things faster for you, but there still needs to be like a give and take, I think. Otherwise there's a huge risk in just letting things go to production as
So the basic argument is like, don't just copy and paste the code from Stack Overflow. That's going to land you in a world of hurt eventually. You got to go understand it, re-implement it in the way that's specific to the problem that you're solving in the system that you're solving it for, whatever. I think the other danger here is that it's the language model makes it so easy to produce so much stuff. So even if you are a junior engineer who is trying to seek feedback from someone on your team about a feature you've put together with a language model, and you've had it produce just more code, the volume of stuff that you have to ask someone to consume, understand, and provide feedback on is so much bigger, which takes time, which takes a lot of attention and intentionality. It just makes it so easy to kind of skip past those parts because you're like, well, I wrote the feature, I had it write the test, the tests are passing, the feature is doing the thing that I'm expecting it to do. And so you have to slow yourself down, I guess, a lot. And then how does that conflict with I don't know, the naive VP of engineering who's like, based on everyone's usage of language models, everyone should be going 10 times faster than they are. So where do you provide time for that rigorous self-review or introspection or whatever? Yeah, I don't know. I guess for us it's just continuing to do the work of understanding all the nonsense that it's spitting out and making sure that it's not too nonsensical.
I think there's something to be said for um, being curious and being taking kind of an engineering, a scientific mindset, and being leaning into using these tools to build your own knowledge and to use them in a way that allows you to learn. I think as an engineer, one of the things I love to do is to debug and investigate and find out things that I didn't know, whether it's about a language or whether it's about an application. And I think that's part of my personality. And whether I'm using an AI agent or whether I'm writing code myself, I bring that mindset of, I wonder what the best way to implement this would be, or I wonder what's going on underneath the surface here in this area of the application. And I think there's something to be said for, regardless of the tools I'm using, bringing an engineering mindset of being curious and kind of tinkering with the system to the table that does slow me down, but it increases the amount that I learn no matter whether I'm writing the code myself or using an agent to generate that code. I do think more holistically, I can play or take a devil's advocate stance and say, if I look at parallels between code writing and the ability for AI agents to generate large portions of code and self-driving cars, I could see a world in which, hey, as a non-engineer, as a product-oriented or business-oriented person, I don't need to learn because these agents are getting better and better, and code writing is becoming a commodity, and I can just allow the agent to get better and learn instead of me having to learn. And I don't need to learn to drive because my car is going to know how to drive. I don't need to know how to code because the agent's going to know how to code. I think as an engineer, I don't like that world. I don't want to live in that world. I like writing code. I like working on systems. I like understanding systems. But I think for some people who are much more oriented around products and businesses and bringing products to market, know that it's invalid for them to say, I don't want to learn how to write code because it's not going to be a necessary skill for me. Um, so perhaps that's some people's perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a very real future where a large majority of code writing is somewhat of a commodity. But like, I don't ever think the importance of having taste and understanding crafting high quality, like understanding what high quality software looks like, is still like that should still be relevant, I would think, moving in the future. The problem becomes how does one learn that if you take away the ability to write code and learn from those mistakes? Because like taste and craft generally comes from doing a thing a bunch of times and like practicing and getting better and failing and whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. It might be it's a little different with code because a very inexperienced person, someone who has no idea about writing code, is probably not going to have or understand what it means to have taste, uh, or look at code and be like, that's well factored and well architected code. But on the design side of things, from a product standpoint, someone can look at an app and be like, this is well designed just because it looks nice to them. And so, like, do they still, if they have that taste, in theory, they can prompt their way to something that matches their taste and matches something that they believe to be high quality. So yeah, I don't know what the answer is. It's more of an observation, I guess. But
I wonder when we will get, or if we will get, or under what circumstances we would get to a point where people no longer look directly at the code. They look at a different representation of the system, which is fed through a model and produces code, which produces a site and produces observability, produces New Relic dashboards, and produces outputs. But there is no human touch point with the code directly. At that point, what makes for well-factored code, good variable names, good decomposition of classes is very different when you don't have a human directly looking at that artifact. And again, this is a world that scares me. I like looking at the code. I like engineering. I like these things. But I don't think it's unreasonable for some organizations to eventually reach the point where they allow agents to fully manage their code base and they're all working and thinking and applying engineering discipline at the design and architecture level and managing the system as a sequence or as a set of components with roles and responsibilities and inputs and outputs and thinking very critically at that level, but never touching the code. Um, that's kind of an interesting thought exercise for me. I haven't given that much thought, but I think that world might not be too far away for some
mhm.
organizations in some contexts.
Yeah, I was reaching for that same metaphor. For instance, I haven't written machine code since, I don't know, we took a risk class in college one time. And someone else's job has been to take the nice Ruby that I write and turn it into, through a few steps, C and
Yeah.
then into whatever. Um, and I'm sure if someone took a lot of time and a lot of care, they could write better machine code than the computers are doing for us to translate that Ruby, but it doesn't matter at a certain point. Yeah, it may be true that the new interface is the language model.
One of the guys I knew when I was living in Chicago actually wrote assembly for robotics in at that time it was the robotics that were being used in warehouses and whatnot. So, one day maybe I will be the equivalent of an assembly writer for a niche market because I'm a Ruby on Rails developer. You're writing that code. Oh man, how antiquated. How cute, Harrison. So, let's see. Talked a little bit about dangerous. Um, so this is an interesting one. One of the thoughts that came to mind for me was I'd love to hear more about how you guys use agents embedded in your ID because I do have kind of a process, and I think it's a process that works for me, but not something that's perfect, right? It's something that I could learn from how other people leverage agents built into their IDE. My process is generally that I create a comprehensive prompt that describes a feature I'm looking to build, describes a pretty large chunk of work. I then try to provide all the context I need in a first prompt. I don't like breadcrumb my way into describing the problem and asking the agent to do bits and pieces. I try to describe it as a whole and ask the agent to do it all. Build this feature for me, write unit tests, do essentially everything that I would try to do to produce the functionality necessary to commit this piece of code. And then I generally modify that by hand. I don't I don't plan to prompt. If everything goes well, I don't plan to prompt the agent again and have a conversation. I really ask it for everything, let it generate what it's going to generate. And for the most part, I then modify its output by hand, saying, I like this, I don't like this, I want to tweak this, whatever it may be. And maybe I'll get to a point where, there's a refactoring of what it's done that would benefit from prompting it and letting it make the change. But that's more rare than common for me. Um, and if I'm working on a feature, that's kind of my process. Do you guys have a similar process that you use? Or does it really vary widely? And it's just, what mood I'm in on the day and what I'm trying to work on. And I don't really have a standard process.
Um, for me, it varies, but I wouldn't say widely. I would say in cases where I know exactly the plan I want to enact to bring something to life, I will probably do something like craft a prompt and say like go and do a bunch of things. For example, when I was trying to build a time tracking application within a Rails application, it's pretty straightforward to say I can you scaffold a uh, you know what did I go with? I forget the names of things, but you have a client, and then you have the client should have these attributes, and you should be able to add a task, and you should have a start and end day, and like describe all these things, and then let it go create all the models, the controllers, the views, and all that stuff. I just let it run because Rails also just gives you nice guardrails for that stuff too. It's gonna know pretty straightforward like what to go build. Um, if I was doing the same thing and I was in a place where I wanted to like learn a little more and understand a little more, then I might do the breadcrumb approach and say like kind of walk me through step by step so I can ask questions along the way. But again, for something like that where you're scaffolding resources and stuff, I already know how that works. I don't need to learn that. But like in a new client, I'm trying to understand the code base a little more. I have a rough idea for how I want the feature to work. That's probably going to be more of like a conversational thing for me to like, all right, help me understand this bit a little bit. Okay. And then I start to form the plan, and then I do the plan kind of iteratively in a breadcrumb style, like you mentioned, where I want to like stop at each step and like understand what it's suggesting because I want to learn more about the code base because the code base is new and a client has asked me to like learn more about their company, their product, their code base. So it's more important to me to understand that rather than let the computer just go generate a bunch of code without me understanding.
If I've done a bunch of different stuff at this point, and I don't know that I found anything that I really like a lot more, any approach that I like the best yet. So I guess it does seem to be sort of dependent. One thing it's dependent on is the context window size. Because like Claude, you run into problems when you get to the like 50,000 token mark, at least with 3.7. Um, and so whenever I find myself bumping up against that, I usually revert to, hey, could we just do this one thing at a time kind of situation, especially if I'm trying to feed the language model a lot of context so that I can control well, so that I have a better chance of getting something useful on the other side. I have done the opposite and said, hey, could you do all this stuff for me? Um, I think that's more dangerous for me because I do feel a little bit strapped for time with regard to all of our competing activities, and so it is more likely for me to accept without rigorous review
Mhm.
some of the stuff that it's going to produce. Whereas if I sort of force myself to go the one step at a time or generate the plan and then let's walk through it a little bit together, I have more chance of actually seeing all the code and thinking about it a little bit more deeply.
Yeah.
Context is it's context and like risk, appetite for risk. Like in a side project application, there's relatively no risk. So like letting an agent do more work for you is acceptable in my opinion, versus, when you're working on a client with a very mature code base that charges a lot of money for their product sort of thing, like you want to take a little more care there, you understand what's going on.
Yeah. I guess I've settled in, and I don't know that this was an explicit decision or just kind of where things have felt about right to the level of a ticket, of a task, not a project, where I like being able to think about a project, the design for a project. How does this feature I'm building fit within the structure of the system? And then think concretely about how do I want to decompose that into steps? How do I want that to appear in pull requests? How do I think these pieces can build on top of one another cleanly? And then having scope in mind for a specific ticket, that's about the level I give as a prompt. I've talked to other people who would take the entire project, write a pitch for the project, and just feed the project into an agent. For whatever reason, that just feels too big for a couple of reasons. For the review and wanting to give my review the rigor it needs. Uh, a large PR gets very little review, whereas a two-line PR gets a lot of scrutiny type of mindset. But also, I think there's a higher likelihood of the agent going in a direction that it deviates from what I have in mind. Again, I often come with a plan in mind or an outline in mind. And if it goes off the rails early in that process and I've given an entire project, it's a lot more waste in trying to backtrack and figure out what do I keep, what do I throw away, do I just start from scratch, that type of thing. So for me, that ticket level ballpark has been kind of a good balance thus far. Any other thoughts on engineering process around leveraging models and their outputs?
Writing tests, I hate writing tests, so it helps with that.
It does. I have found it short circuit a lot of testing. It produces tests that pass, but don't actually test much or anything. So yeah.
Again, that's why it's good for review. But in terms of like when you have a blank page of a spec that you need to write, my gosh, is it helpful at
Yeah.
getting you 80% of the way there.
Also, I find in Rails writing the RSpec outline. Here's my describe, here's my context, here's my test, it blocks, and then letting it fill in the details gives it a nice structure and kind of constrains its ability to short circuit or circumvent some of the internal testings that it otherwise might. Yeah. Cool.
I guess let's talk about what we should start, stop, and continue doing at Go Between with regards to AI in general. Is there anything you feel like we can do more of? Any, I guess this kind of like piggybacks on some of the other things I was talking about in the first topic, like use it to take on more ambitious projects. Can we build or take on more work with the same amount of commitments using AI, that sort of thing? I don't know. Um, I like using AI editors; they're super helpful. So I'd like to continue doing that. Um, yeah, I don't know if there's like more stuff we can incorporate into our workflow to improve our day-to-day life at Go Between.
One thing that sticks out to me is continuing to iterate on like the rules text file and other more general prompting sort of techniques.
It's a good one.
So like we're approaching a new Next.js application. Sorry, Nest.js. I will never
Nest
not get
chess.
those confused. We should, the three of us, have a rules file that we collaborate on and agree is going to be helpful for a given for that given project, and then iterate on it.
Yes, that's a really good one. I think investing more into our Rails template and corresponding components in such a way that you combine that with rules. If you combine a framework, a set of components, and a set of rules with a model, I think it speeds up even more the prototype and the fidelity of the prototypes that you can develop, and you can do it much quickly or much faster, more quickly. Um, that's definitely something I've experienced just building prototypes recently without a strong component library or consistent component library. The designs that it produces are real and lifelike and look okay, but they're lacking some of that like nice polish you would typically see in a more mature or established product that's been well designed and thought through. And so I think some of those choices can be made up front, and incorporated into like a Rails template and make it much easier to like stub out and build user interfaces that look nice much faster.
I think for me, thinking about the nature of our business as a whole, some focus on products, some focus on client-based consulting, staff augmentation, smaller projects. I definitely think there's an opportunity to do more in the product development arena, leveraging these
Mhm.
tools. I think that requires time and conserving a portion of our time or go between or product development time. I think over the course of the last month or so, that's gone away and it ebbs and flows. Um, but trying to do a better job of reserving space in our commitments for putting time and attention in that area, and then having some sense of where we want to spend that time. Doesn't have to be a roadmap or whatnot, but I do think there's an exercise that we would benefit from going through more regularly, prototyping, putting something out there, getting feedback, seeing what sticks, and iterating and throwing things away that don't stick and furthering things that do stick. Um, I think that's a flywheel that we just haven't gotten started, and it's tough. It's a tough thing to start doing. But I think that's one area where we can leverage some of these tools to iterate more quickly. I also like the idea and think we can get efficiency boosts from these tools on smaller projects, on the prototyping, on helping smaller teams launch a product, and on helping established businesses build and develop new tools within their organization. I think those projects are areas in which we can move quickly, deliver more functionality more quickly, and also have an opportunity to continue to provide support to clients after we've built something and to maintain that partnership and that relationship. And again, bring a lot of value, bring a lot of context, bring a lot of knowledge to the table about the applications that we've helped them build, and deliver a lot of value without necessarily taking as much time and attention as some of our staff augmentation engagements often take. So I don't know. I wonder if these type of tools will change the way I think about and those opportunities and those different engagements, and make it easier to lean in to focusing on more smaller engagements. Um, I don't know.
I mean, I definitely agree. Just in my brief experience, like, within an hour or two, having an idea for like, yeah, hit all the time tracking apps out there and like having something that kind of tracks time. You can do that in like a couple hours. And I think that does open the door to like, if you have an idea for something small that might make our life easier, just go build it. Or if I would also be curious in the same vein in the vein of product development. As these things mature, especially agents, exploring ways to leverage them to do research for us or ideate on new products and help us understand things that we can go build, something that's been traditionally time consuming or difficult for us to come up with like the right product. I think there's opportunity for agents to help in that regard, and leveraging AI in that regard could be beneficial to our product development stuff. Some of the time consuming tasks that we don't like to do or don't have time to do can be taken over by agents. But yeah, I think it's like spending more time understanding what kind of workflow or flywheels we can create to help the business is probably like a good exercise and good use of our time. Next summit to complete.
Yeah, what do you all do while the language model is doing stuff for you? They mentioned in the podcast that they're like, "Oh, I'm in a meeting. Let me go ask Claude to fix his bug or whatever." And on one hand, that sounds like a context switching nightmare. It sounds like you would just, I don't know, Swiss cheese your brain immediately. On the other hand, you got to do something. So, like, while we're building prototypes and I'm asking for the language model to take a stab at developing a pretty large swath of proposed functionality, it takes a few minutes. And so I go tab over to the internet and I look at some pictures of cats, and then the context leaves my mind, and then I switch back into the code base. And yeah, like, should I just be following along much more carefully as it spits out all of its nonsense? I don't know. What do you all?
Again, it depends, but yeah, like to keep using the time tracking app as an example here, when there's like a set of things that I feel confident that the model can do, and it's gonna take like a few minutes to scaffold all these routes and models and whatever, like I don't know, 5 minutes, like it is reasonable. Go get a coffee or whatever. Um, Another example would be like recently with a client, like reviewing some feedback they have on the application. It's possible to like have the model help implement some of the feedback and then go back to watching the video of the feedback they provided, and like or in a separate window. Sometimes like I'll just have Claude pulled up and I might be asking it questions related to the design or product or implementation that are unrelated to the code. And so while the code is actually writing, I can like continue pulling on threads about the implementation details that I want to understand to help power up the next task.
I think for me, generally, I do one of two things, and it depends upon how long I expect the model to take. If I don't expect the
Mhm.
model to take all that long, I'll review its output. I'll watch over its shoulder
Yeah.
and say, yeah, I agree with your plan. Oh, that's interesting, whatever. And just keep the context, right? 30 seconds
Yeah.
later, I jump in and make its changes. Otherwise, if I think it's going to take longer for whatever reason, I want to put my pencil down, I'll prompt the model, go switch to something else, and not try to bounce back as soon as the model completes, because I'm not looking to pick up where it left off. Sometimes
Yeah.
that's going and checking Slack. Sometimes that's staying in the context of the project that I'm already working in, or the team that I'm already working with, doing other productive things, code reviews, whatnot. But sometimes it's fully context switching off and coming back with fresh perspective on the outputs of the model. It generally falls in one of those two camps. And sometimes it happens pretty rapidly. I'll prompt the model, go respond to a Slack message or two, maybe on the same project, maybe on a different project, bounce back, pick back up. I think my brain is already pretty Swiss cheese from the past close to a decade of working across multiple teams and clients. And so I don't know that that's healthy, but it works. It's efficient. Um, I would say I do not use multiple agents simultaneously to write the code with one and write the tests with another and bounce back and forth. That makes my brain feel more like a pretzel. For whatever reason, Swiss cheese feels great. Pretzel feels bad. I don't know. Choose your metaphor of choice, but whatever. Like trying to use two models at the same time feels both confusing. Maybe it's efficient, but for me, it would feel like an inefficient way to decompose my brain cycles. So that's general mindset.
mean, the idea
Yeah.
of like having an idea for a feature, prompting it, and then the like right before a meeting, and then going into a meeting and coming out of that meeting with like a pull request of a bunch of stuff to review that may or may not be ready. It's interesting for sure. I think we're I question how real that life is. I feel like that could work for certain types of applications, but some of the some applications are just gonna be, I feel like they're too complex or complicated. We're not in that world just yet, where I would like fully trust it to produce something that is correct, the correct implementation. But I don't think it's like not a world that you can get to. Definitely. And in that world, that's why I think, to do the callback from before, the scope of what's possible then with smaller teams is a very real topic. Because like, what do you do? Well, you go work on like another feature. And so like that's where you get like, can three people now manage a product that is really large in scope that was traditionally, managed by a team of 100 engineers? Is that a thing? So yeah, I don't know.
I don't think this parallel is perfect, but a parallel that I look at is how long ago were warehouses unautomatable? You had to have people driving forklifts, organizing your products in order for your warehouse to run smoothly. And now, how large and complex can a warehouse be and be fully automated? I don't know that I know for sure, but I certainly feel like there's quite a bit of automation, both machinery and scanning, tracking, organizing of warehouses that happens without a human ever touching the packages. Um, I think there is the potential for software development in some contexts to get to a similar state of automation, and I think the attention then moves toward designing the warehouse and architecting the system and connecting different pieces and defining the roles and responsibilities of the multiple agents that feed into that. The design review agent, the code review agent, the automated test agent, the code writing agent. And maybe it's not as clean as clear as the lines that I'm drawing there. I don't know what that world will look like, but it seems plausible that we may get closer and closer to a world where agents are feeding into one another and automating processes, the software development processes, similar to the way they automate moving and organizing packages within a warehouse. We got time for one more?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a great question. I have no idea what vibe coding is. I've seen a bunch of memes that make fun of vibe coding. I would say that what I do with an AI agent has nothing to do with vibe. I feel pretty good when I'm working with the agent because I'm looking at the code and thinking about the code. But what the heck is vibe coding? Can someone pull me out of the dark ages?
I think the I think the true definition of vibe coding is that you're only supposed to prompt and you're not allowed to actually write any of the code.
Okay.
So it's all about asking the model to produce something for you. And if you like it, all good,
Yeah, yeah.
man. If you don't, then you prompt it again until you get something you like. And you just kind of prompt your way based on the vibes you're getting back from the model and the output. And I mean, it's kind of a silly term, but like, vibe isn't terrible in that. I do think what's important with vibe coding is that it's a mindset. And so you need to tell your mind to think about the output a little differently. And that's why I think vibe coding is particularly good or useful for prototyping and something that's like not necessarily production ready code. I mean, I'm sure it can be, but like, if it's all about vibes, then like, you're not going to be thinking necessarily about all the nitty gritty details required to build a secure, sort of well factored product, feature, and application. It's about producing output, and getting feedback, and moving at probably a faster pace. Just kind of going off what feels right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the work.
How'd I do, Truman, our resident young person? You're the youngest member, I think.
That is true. I think you are the AI person, though, Dan. At least you've been
Yeah.
leading the.
Does that make me like the curmudgeon granddad of the crew, like old snarky hairs there? Leave on coding.
I mean, if I'm the AI person, then I'm still on like the low end of the spectrum. So I'd say,
I vibe coded recently. I did do a vibe code. Um, we had the performance investigation into what does it mean to do something like 1.5 billion times. And there's a happy path for doing that work, and you want to like test out that happy path and see how fast it operates and whatever. Yeah, I totally vibe coded that up. Just asked it to do the thing. I did ask it to write tests so that I could run those tests and make sure that it was still like directionally pointed in the right way. And in the middle of my vibe coding tests, I did notice that it was having so much trouble implementing part of this feature that it did literally just hard code the test and the implementation to like agree and skip a bunch of the work that it was supposed to be doing. So my early performance tests were going a lot faster than they would have otherwise. But yeah, I ran that on Vibes and it worked pretty well.
really great for technical discovery, prototyping, early stage, rapid development sort of stuff. But yeah, at some point, those vibes need to turn into something a little more um, real.
Yeah, I
I don't
wonder
know a
if
better word.
if if I weren't an engineer and I were leaning into vibe coding, if my experience would be similar to the experience that I've had writing blog posts or reviewing whatever content I'm about to post, where ChatGPT does nothing but just promote my ego. It's like, great post, great email, great, like it would just tell me, hey, you have such a great idea for this code. This is going so well. This is gonna be a blockbuster, next unicorn right here, and falls flat on its face.
That's exactly what happens. Oh,
Oh,
that is so smart of you to have pointed out this optimization.
yeah.
What a genius you are. Let me implement that for you. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I Vive for people that don't know like how to program and they're not, aware of what's good or bad in terms of software engineering. Vibe coding is the only coding they probably are aware of by that definition, because they're probably just prompting. And as long as the thing they want to exist works the way they expect it to work, then it's done and they'll move on.
Or are they using
And
it as
that's
a
how you
tutor?
end up with, yeah,
Like you said,
that's how
it's a
you end up
tool.
with
You
it.
can
Sorry,
use it in a
that's how
couple of
you,
ways.
real quick, that's how you end up with like environment variables in production code.
No.
That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
Edit that up, Truman. Make that part less us shouting over each other. Thank you.
I'm not going to do anything. We're using Descript, so the language model is going to reproduce this whole episode for us.
And it's going to tell you, what a great podcast you've made. This is a hit, man. Way to go. Your follow count's going through the roof. Oh, anything else?
I hate LinkedIn. Keep that in there.
Never mind. Follower count just tanked.